Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman has the evening off. On the show tonight.
Never got to fulfill my trip, my Christmas trip to see my family.
Frustration builds as Southwest strands passengers at Midway Airport.
Your money is not charity.
Congressman Mike Quigley on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's visit to Congress.
That when we know someone is having struggles, that we don't ignore it, that we reach out.
3 Chicago police officers die by suicide in the span of a week. We talk with 2 mental health professionals about the challenges that officers face. To buy or not to buy, a 2023 outlook of Chicago's housing market as interest rates nearly double this year.
Seek out treatment. Don't do it alone.
Advice for maintaining sobriety during the holiday season.
What was worse, the truth or my imagination?
One-on-one with renowned writer Sandra Cisneros on her new collection of poems.
You ever feel those people inching towards you? You're just like, get the hell away from me.
And Chicago comedian Pat McGann on being a latecomer to stand up and playing the iconic Chicago Theater. But first, some of today's top stories. The U.S. Supreme Court rules the COVID-era Title 42 border policy will remain in place for now as legal challenges play out. The program allows Border Patrol agents to turn away migrants at the southern border as a health measure during the pandemic without giving them a chance to apply for asylum. The 5-4 vote would keep that policy in place. It's a policy implemented by former President Donald Trump in March of 2020. The justices say the court would hear arguments on the case in February. Governor J.B. Pritzker's administration sells the Damon silos despite pushback from community and environmental groups. The state sold the silos to Michael Tayden Jr. and his family. Tayden Jr. co-owns Matt Asphalt in McKinley Park, and that's an asphalt mixing plant that has drawn concerns from residents about pollution affecting the air quality in the surrounding neighborhood. Some community environmental groups attempted to delay the sale from going through in order to get some more community input. The sale was finalized last week. Uber and Lyft drivers plan on rallying this evening at O'Hare International Airport, demanding better working conditions and fair pay. Rideshare drivers with the Justice for App Workers Coalition will be refusing rides from O'Hare tonight. It's all in an effort to highlight what coalition organizers say are inhumane conditions that drivers face in light of one of the busiest times of the year for rideshare drivers. A representative with the coalition says in a statement, quote, drivers are organizing together this holiday season to demand transformational change within the industry and to ensure an end to arbitrary deactivation without due process, which can cost drivers their livelihoods. And up next, stranded airline passengers at Chicago's Midway Airport. Amanda Vinicky takes a look right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Southwest Airlines has canceled thousands of flights the past several days, leaving customers stranded, including right here at Chicago's Midway Airport. Our Amanda Vinicky met some of them today and joins us now with more on what is behind the chaos. Amanda, what's been going on the last couple days?
Yeah, Paris, it tis the season to be jolly, but that, of course, is difficult when you are stuck in a smelly, I was there, crowded airport baggage claim area over Christmas instead of spending precious days off with your family, as is the case for thousands of people, including a 20-year-old woman who flew from Miami Sunday morning. Her final destination, New York, to see her mother and siblings.
I had a connecting flight here in Chicago Midway, and it got canceled, so never got to fulfill my trip, my Christmas trip to see my family.
Not only that, but hotels were full, so she couldn't get a voucher to stay in one. Restaurants at the airport close at 10 p.m., so that was difficult. And then she had to keep her carry-on on her, and that was a stuffed and heavy backpack, so her shoulders are sore. And hard, of course, to get sleep on those heavy seats. She was supposed to be leaving New York today after that vacation to get home to work. Instead, not only did she never get to the Big Apple, Southwest doesn't have return flights until January, so she is set to leave tonight at 10 p.m. on a Greyhound for a 2-day bus ride home. It was the opposite for the Gleasons, who were supposed to get in Thursday from Washington to spend Christmas in Chicago with their children. Instead, they ended up spending hours at the D.C. airport with little to no communication from Southwest. They did finally get to Midway this afternoon.
I'm not complaining about the weather. Anybody from Chicago knows that we have weather here. And I'm not complaining about the Christmas rush, because anybody with their head on knows there's a rush at Christmas, the busiest travel time of the year. But the way that Southwest has handled this compared to other airlines is very unfortunate, very disappointing.
Marty Gleason says he's frustrated for what he says is the callous attitude of indifference from Southwest. It's not just passengers. Luggage is stranded too, with suitcases from canceled flights being sent to destinations even if owners aren't on the planes. Pilots and flight attendants unsettled as well. Corliss King is leader of the local union for Southwest flight attendants. She did fly on Christmas and says everyone on that flight was happy. She knows, though, that is an anomaly. She says crews and passengers alike are at the mercy of antiquated technology. She says her union has asked management to update for years.
They did not have any idea when they were going, where they were sleeping, if they were going to be able to have a hotel on hold for 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours. Because we can't just say, I'm out of here, we have to be released contractually and legally. We have to have certain things like the proper rest. When our technology fails like it did, it fails big.
DePaul University professor Joe Schriederman has studied the aviation industry for decades and says he has never seen a meltdown like this. While there was, of course, a winter storm, he says the level of dysfunction here goes way past weather.
The most striking statistic right now is you look at United American and Delta, and their cancellation rates are really low. I mean, less than 5%. United's practically none at all. And, Southwest, things are going in the opposite direction. And we can see here that the flight crew planning function of Southwest had some real problems. We also know they had perhaps higher than usual absenteeism, but nothing should trigger this kind of crises. And it's just almost a humanitarian issue at the airports.
He says a major contributing factor is Southwest's point-to-point operation system, usually an advantage that allows the airline to keep planes in the air. But now it is a downfall.
So when things go bad, you have people spread all over the country, and those flights don't immediately return back to the big hubs, like in United's case, O'Hare, Houston, Newark, or Denver. And you can consolidate your labor and then kind of reset things and send them out again from those big hubs. They have people spread all over the country on planes that aren't destined to bring them back home. And they actually had a problem, don't even know where all their crew were.
But King says Southwest's problem is that it's acting like the small, feisty airline it used to be, that it began as, rather than the largest carrier it is now.
Southwest Airlines has been born from being unique. I think that's part of our charm, and it does work for us. However, there are some aspects of it that you have to modernize. Your communications and your technology, your crew scheduling, where your people are and knowing where they are and not losing people in the system for 4 days, 5 days. That is something that has to stop.
The turmoil has Southwest under a federal probe with the U.S. Department of Transportation, which tweeted that it is concerned by Southwest's unacceptable rate of cancellations and delays and reports of lack of prompt customer service. The department will examine whether cancellations were controllable and if Southwest is complying with its customer service plan. For its part, Southwest is apologizing. The airline says it was fully staffed going into the holiday weekend, but what it called operational conditions from severe weather caused what it says is an unprecedented volume of schedule changes. Now, it will be days before things are resolved. In its latest update, Southwest says, as we continue the work to recover our operation, we have made the decision to continue operating a reduced schedule by flying roughly 1/3 of our schedule for the next several days. Neither of the passengers we talked with are interested in flying Southwest ever again. Will you fly them again?
No. No, never again. I love the free bags. I love the free bags, free check-in bags, but no, it's not worth it.
We've been canceled so many times now that I can't keep track, but I certainly hope that some of their senior management will be canceled as a result of this debacle.
In Paris, we will be watching to see what government regulations, if any, do stem from all of this mayhem, leaving those folks really marooned at Midway.
It's like a plot to a holiday movie here, Amanda, but no happy ending
No,
so far
hopefully
for
maybe
these
a romantic
passengers.
story here and there. I don't know. I didn't find any.
A lot happens on
a good Hallmark
those
flick.
Greyhound buses. Okay, Amanda, thanks very much. Congress recently passed a $1.7 trillion spending bill, which includes nearly $50 billion in additional aid to Ukraine. This as Russia remains on the offensive in its invasion of that country. The additional aid comes as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy visited the U.S. House last week to address lawmakers.
Let the terrorist state be held responsible for its terror and aggression and compensate all losses done by this war. Let the world see that the United States are here.
And here to discuss Ukraine and more is Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democrat from Chicago's North Side. Congressman Quigley, welcome back. Happy holidays to you. Give us a sense of the atmosphere during that joint session in the House last week.
You know, Paris, I've been here almost 14 years. There are very few special moments like this. You can feel the excitement in the air, clearly a sense of history, as close to Winston Churchill speaking before Congress as he did for our generation.
And give us a sense of how this was able to come about there. You see him visiting with President Biden in a joint press conference. Obviously, this was kept under wraps until a day before. How was this pulled off?
You know, the fewer people know, the better. I was told quietly, you know, make sure you're here. You're going to be one of those that escort President Zelenskyy onto the floor. And it was, don't talk about it until it happens.
And you did escort him on the floor. What words were exchanged when you met face-to-face with him?
Yeah, we met before. We were reminded that we met in Kyiv in July and had a much, much longer discussion about how the war was unfolding and what Ukraine needed. This was more a question of, is the aid package going to pass? A great deal of gratitude. And of course, I had to add the invitation to Chicago, where he was excited about coming to visit. He wasn't sure he could return to his hockey playing days of his youth, but he would think about it.
I'm sure he'd be well received here in Chicago, especially with the large Ukrainian American community that resides here. And speaking of that aid of nearly $45 billion, it passed the House. What exactly is this money going to go toward?
Well, look, a little over half of it's going to go toward military assistance. A lot of it will go toward economic aid and humanitarian aid. This is a country whose economy is crushed because of the war. And the humanitarian aid is obvious. This is a very tough, cold winter, and the Russians are further committing war crimes by targeting civilian targets and particularly infrastructure. So it's a life and death situation. It's an important role for our country to help.
And as you know, Republicans take control of the House come January. A significant chunk of that party is skeptical of Ukraine and additional aid to that country. Is this possibly it in terms of financial assistance for the time being?
Look, it's the question to ask. A couple things. We passed such a large package to make sure that we could probably take care of all the needs for another year until at least the leadership issues on the Republican side are taken care of. But I'll say this. I still think the majority of the Republican caucus favors ongoing strong support for Ukraine to the duration of this war. I think what you're seeing with Leader McCarthy is his attempts to become speaker and apparently willing to say anything to the farthest extreme. But this is a Reagan Republican Party versus the relative newcomers as far as how they support this effort.
Speaking of Kevin McCarthy, do you believe at this point he has the votes to become the next Speaker of the House, given some of the opposition within his own party?
You know, I've been through this on our side, and the difference is this. Usually people want something, right? Some degree of horse trading. For the longest time, I felt that McCarthy was a shoo-in, and he probably still would be the next Speaker. But in talking to my sort of centrist Republican friends, they're starting to worry. They're starting to think if the farthest right, and there doesn't have to be that many, don't want him to be Speaker, they're hard-pressed. The other problem is they clearly don't have a plan B. So we could be into a long, protracted fight as to who the Republicans choose as leader, which will do nothing but stymie any efforts to move forward to the next Congress for everyone.
It'll be something to watch as the new year comes around. I want to get to another issue domestically, the issue of immigration. Today, the Supreme Court rules 5-4 to keep Title 42 in place. That's the Trump-era executive order that allows for migrants to be expelled from the country swiftly due to COVID. So what is the impact of this decision to keep Title 42 around?
Obviously, there's a lot of suffering that's going to be taking place. What the Trump administration did was destroy the system which brought migrants into this country and dealt with them from a health point of view, from a legal point of view, and all other respects. So now we have to face the realities of what's taking place in those home countries. So who we are as a country is the Statue of Liberty is not holding up a stop sign. We need to have secure borders, but we need to understand that those crises need to be resolved at their source, and we need to help those who we bring into this country. This country's strength has always been its diversity, led by its immigration.
And at the same time, you have a new report saying there are about 1.6 million asylum seekers right now awaiting their cases to be adjudicated as thousands come across the border every day. Are there any contours of any kind of blueprint for an immigration bill in a new Republican-controlled Congress?
You know, I don't see it, and it's a shame. We came so close. There was a bipartisan group, the Gang of Eight, that had immigration reform out of the Senate. Comprehensive immigration reform, not just the Dreamers, which are important. And unfortunately, two Republican speakers in a row refused to let the bill come on the floor, on the House, where it would have passed. And again, when the whole system was fractured, a crisis like this, where there's so many seeking asylums, is only going to get worse. It's only going to get backed up more. So we had our opportunities. I don't see any legislation passing. This has become a purely partisan issue, which, again, this is not what our country is about.
You know, and a lot of folks cry about this issue, but again, no legislative progress, it seems. I got to ask you about this Republican-elect from New York, George Santos, who has apparently fabricated almost his entire resume, where he went to school, who he is. Should he resign? And if not, is there some kind of legal mechanism to remove him from office, or should he just take his seat?
Well, I think what he's going to do is just take his seat, because apparently he has absolutely no pride. I mean, owning up to these things, which he finally did, that he fabricated all, is just extraordinary. So in the final analysis, the only people that can remove him, probably in 2 years, are the people that put him there, the people that voted for him in the first place. You know, it's a shame, because it brings disrespect to the whole legislative body. And at this point in time, that's the last thing we need.
All right, Congressman Quigley, we look forward to talking to you in the new term, and a Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to all.
Interest rates have more than doubled this past year, landing a blow on a historic pandemic-era housing boom. Some experts are saying the chill could become an all-out freeze by next year if these interest rate hikes continue. And here to discuss where the market might go in 2023 and where it has been is Dennis Rodkin, a residential real estate reporter for Crain's Chicago Business. Dennis, always great to see you.
Hi, Paris. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to have you here in person. We've talked via Zoom a few times. So in your most recent article, you say that Chicago's housing market is in a, quote, holding pattern heading into 2023. What do you mean by that?
Well, the primary thing we don't know is what's going to happen with interest rates. They went up, as you mentioned. They doubled in the course of the first 10 months of the year. They've come down a little bit. The Federal Reserve has already said that maybe it's been a little too much. So if interest rates continue to go up as steeply as they were, then we probably will see quite a deeper freeze on the housing market. If they pull back on that a little bit, maybe we get some breathing room.
And you created a chart that shows fast sales of 2 weeks or less, where the house is just on the market for a couple weeks. They virtually disappeared. They're under 10% after hitting a high in 2021. What are the implications of these numbers?
Well, it really means that if your neighbors were selling their house last year and it went off the market in less than 2 weeks, you should not expect the same. At the time, you were thinking, wow, they're sold in 14 days, maybe mine will sell in 12 because things were getting faster. Things have slowed down so much. Sellers in particular need to be aware that most homes, houses and condos, are sitting on the market far longer than they were. The pace was furious for so long, and the brakes went on when interest rates went up.
Although Chicago is in a better position, as I understand, than a lot of other American cities because the simple fact that the prices didn't rise quite as fast here as it did in other cities.
That's true. While our home prices went up quite a bit during the boom, they didn't go up anything like what was going on in Phoenix, in Seattle, in San Francisco. So there's not as much air that was pumped into those prices and not as much to come back out. Some of those places have started to see prices fall. We're still seeing them grow just by much smaller amounts. And we also, because our prices didn't go up so much, we're a very affordable city. Among big cities, we're one of the most affordable for housing because, again, our prices didn't go up as much and our salaries did. So we're in a really good position going into 2023. The question is going to be, is there demand for these homes?
Although if you look at the month of November, year over year, prices went down, sales went down. Do you anticipate that trend could continue into 2023?
Prices went down only in the city. City sales, home sales, the median price was down over 6%, but city sales are only 1 out of 5 for the regional sales, and the region's prices were still up just a little bit, about 1.5%. So the question will be, does the whole region go down? Does the city go down even farther? But yeah, what we're watching for is to see, do prices go down farther? Sales are down. The number of sales in November was not only, it was expected to be well below the boom, well below 2021, but it also, when I looked at the averages, we saw fewer homes sold in November than during the same time in the last 3 years prior to the pandemic. Normal years, 2017 to 2019, when we didn't have all the craziness that was going on in the next few years. That's a big drop. And so one of the questions is going to be, do people come back into the market? We don't expect to get sales back up to the level of the pandemic boom, but do they get up above 2017 to 2019? That's going to be a big question.
All right, so this dip in the city of Chicago, do you anticipate that's going to turn around and it's going to be more commensurate with the rest of the region, or could this continue?
It's hard to say. Prices had been flat in the city for months while they'd still been growing in the larger region. And then suddenly there was this significant drop. So what I don't know is, what's December, January going to bring? Will it get back to being flat in the city? Will the decline be larger? But once again, that's 1 out of 5 sales for the region. So for the city to drop the city would have to drop very dramatically to pull the whole region down. And we don't know what the region will do overall.
Although a lot of city residents are waiting with bated breath to see if those numbers here in the city improve, and then getting to a micro level, south and south suburban neighborhoods, they've been hit pretty disproportionately hard, have they not?
Yeah, so one of the things I had been watching, actually for about 10 years, but especially during the pandemic, is this rehab wave of foreclosures, senior citizens' homes, other things that had not been redone, were redone by rehabbers, and there was huge demand for them. They were often in the first-time buyer price when they were put back on the market. They were in the $300, $350 range, and we have seen a dramatic chill on those sales in the last several months. We've seen a lot of those properties sit on the market. There was great demand for them. Now there seems to be less so because there are fewer first-time buyers in the market. And so one of the questions is going to be, where do those entrepreneurs who were doing that work go? Where do those laborers who were working for them go? What happens with the homes that have been rehabbed and don't sell? There's a lot riding on those homes in the south neighborhoods and South Cook County suburbs.
Certainly could be ripple effects for the entire economy. There is one segment that's doing exceedingly well, historically well. Tell us which segment of the market that is.
Unbelievably well, really, is the way at $4 million and up. Really, at $1 million and up, things are still going very well because those are people who generally don't really have to worry about interest rates when buying a home. But at the extreme upper end of the market, from $4 million up in the Chicago area, the average number of sales in a year prior to the pandemic was 51. In 2021, it went up to 101 sales, and so far with 2022 nearly over, we're at 133 sales at $4 million or more, nearly 3 times the average what was happening in the years before the pandemic.
And very, very quickly, what accounts for this is just the fact that wealthy people have more money to spend and are willing to purchase properties?
Stock wealth was driving it, though the stock market is down, and the other thing is, even at the high end, our properties are more affordable than those you might get in Palm Beach or Colorado or Palm Springs or wherever you're buying. So they're buying up. And if you're going to have a stake here, they want the nicest one they can get, and they're spending to get it.
I guess a silver lining there, but a lot of anticipation going into 2023. Dennis Rodkin, thank you so much.
Thanks, Paris.
And up next, one-on-one with renowned writer Sandra Cisneros.
Do you think there's been sort of a rethinking of how those events happened here in Chicago?
I made a promise to myself in my career that every year I would make a piece of art dedicated to the memory.
Got into a zone of mentor to children. See what we can do to kind of elevate each other. We all we got at this point.
I'm using my past to push forward, to build a movement to create the world that we all want to see.
She is an award-winning poet who grew up in Chicago, and she's had some good news for fans of her literature. Sandra Cisneros recently sat down with Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez to talk about her life, career, and a new book of poems. Here's another look.
I realize I have a responsibility to teach, to guide, and to transform.
At 67 years old, Sandra Cisneros has a fruitful career. She's known for tapping into her own life experiences to write about race, sexuality, social status, and identity.
The most important reason why we need poetry now is for us to cleanse, to understand ourselves, to forgive ourselves and forgive all those around us, to become more human, to become more compassionate.
The acclaimed writer stopped in her hometown for a reading of her new book at the Field Museum. Woman Without Shame is her first published collection of poems in 28 years.
It was a beautiful audience. They gave me a standing ovation when I came in, and that made me want to cry. I almost cried. I was just so overwhelmed by the wave of love that's here in Chicago for me.
We met Cisneros at the Roby Hotel in Wicker Park, an area she says holds many memories. The only daughter of Mexican immigrants, grew up with 6 brothers on Chicago's West Side, a neighborhood her book, The House on Mango Street, was inspired by.
We really are literally in the intersections of my life because I grew up in several Chicago neighborhoods, but specifically the one that everyone knows about is my Humboldt Park home, a few blocks from here on Campbell Street, which I renamed Mango Street in my book. And I went to high school at Josephinum High School on Oakley, just walking distance from here.
Cisneros has received numerous awards, including a 2015 National Medal of Arts.
I think there isn't a day that I'm not astonished by where my life has taken me because, you know, I was that quiet girl in the classroom that never raised her hand, that learned how to defend myself by lowering my head and not sticking out.
We talk about her journey in finding her voice between her Mexican and American identities.
You're going to have to search to decolonize yourself, and you're going to have to find your chosen family.
In her latest work, Cisneros shares her thoughts on being a Latina woman navigating love, family, aging, and death.
This is called My Mother and Sex. 8 live births. How many dead? Who knew? Not us, her 7 survivors. When a bedroom scene flashed on TV, she'd shriek.
It's her last stop of her book tour before she heads home to San Miguel de Allende, the Mexican city where she's lived for years.
I want people to not be afraid to write and express their feelings. It comes from your heart. And I hope that everyone runs and gets a notebook and a pen and just writes because you need to speak your truth.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
And her collection of poems, Women Without Shame, is now available in bookstores. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, the death toll rises at the Chicago Police Department after a third officer is found dead by suicide in a single week. A look at what's behind this tragedy. The holidays can be a difficult time for people trying to stay sober. Advice on how to support those in recovery. And comedian and Southsider Pat McGann on forging a career in stand-up and his upcoming gig at the iconic Chicago Theater. But first, some more of today's top stories. 5 people, including a 21-year-old man and an 18-year-old man, were killed in shooting incidents over the holiday weekend across Chicago. This according to Chicago Police Department data, which found 19 people shot Friday evening through Monday. The field for the city's race for mayor might be getting a little bit smaller. Hearing took place at the Chicago Board of Elections this afternoon that could result in candidate Roderick Sawyer's removal from the ballot. Willie Wilson campaign operative Ricky Hendon is challenging Sawyer's nominating petitions. No decision was made today, and the Board of Elections says it'll reconvene about this on January 3rd. It's a wrap on Christmas and Hanukkah, but what to do with all the holiday gift wrap left in the aftermath? Well, according to the city's Department of Streets and Sanitation, you can recycle wrapping paper, except the metallic and glittery kind, also paper gift bags, packing paper, as well as gift and shipping boxes. You can't recycle ribbons, bows, bubble wrap, air packs, or packing peanuts. You can packing peanuts. I don't even know what those are. Visiting our website, maybe I should. Visit our website for a complete list of wrapping materials that can and cannot get recycled. That's all at WTTW.com/news. 3 Chicago police officers have died by suicide in the last week, bringing the total number of CPD officer suicides to 7 this year. This comes as the police union has complained about heavy workloads, canceled days off, and a general anti-police climate. And that's according to officers, that's adding to officers' mental health woes. And joining us to talk about this are Robert Sobo, Director of the Employee Assistance Program for the Chicago Police Department, and Alicia Warren, Assistant Commissioner of Mental Health at the Chicago Department of Public Health. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight. Dr. Sobo, we should start with you. Give us the reaction inside the police department right now to these 3 suicides in the past week plus.
Well, I think people are aggravated, scared, angry, confused, and they want answers as to what we are doing as a department, as a community, and a society to help those who serve deal with, the extraordinary stresses and traumas that they deal with, because they are having, pretty catastrophic consequences on the men and women in our Chicago Police Department.
Catastrophic over the last week and 7 the entire year. Alicia Warren, can we pinpoint any factors that are causing this spike right now?
I mean, I think the holidays can be a really challenging time for anybody. It brings up a lot of feelings of grief and loss and feelings of loneliness. I know one of the big things that contributes to suicide for all Chicagoans is this not wanting to be a burden on your loved ones. And that's a really important thing that I think that we deal with at the Public Health Department when we look at suicide and suicide prevention. During the pandemic, we saw that there was an increase in 10 to 15% more suicides across all of Chicagoans. And so that's something we take really seriously, the Public Health Department. Because of that, last year we launched a campaign, Unspoken. And really what that campaign speaks to is you don't have to suffer in silence when it comes to mental health. That this is something that we should be talking about. This is something that there are resources for, and it's really important to be able to reach out. You can find our Unspoken campaign at mentalhealth.chicago.gov. There's a number of different resources that you can find there, in addition to the Unspoken.
Certainly this is on a lot of folks' minds right now this time of the year. Dr. Sobo, is there any through line we can point to, especially with these 3 suicides in the last week?
This has got to be a team approach. The media included, the department included, our leaders, our peers. We have to come together to take away barriers of people seeking help for mental health issues. Chicago Police Department and our members don't exist in a vacuum. They are just as vulnerable to mental health problems as the general population. What makes them more susceptible to mental health problems is, again, the stress that they deal with on a daily basis and the sometimes very tragic traumas that they experience on the job and carry around with them that needs attention. It needs to be processed. But, you know, all of these issues have to be dealt with together as a team. The programs are there, the experts are there, but, you know, we're like a tool. The greatest tool is not going to be able to help fix or deal with things if you don't take them out and utilize them.
And I want to get to a statement from the police superintendent, David Brown, about the suicide. He says, quote, "The recent tragedies we have faced are immensely devastating for the families and loved ones of those we have lost to suicide, as well as every member of the department. I ask the people of Chicago to continue to keep all those affected in your prayers right now." Alicia, remind us the telltale signs that everybody needs to be looking out for if they are concerned about suicide.
Sure. I think isolation, noticing a friend or loved one that is really withdrawing from any social settings, not being as responsive to things, looking at like end-of-life planning. Often we see them start to get more sentimental or emotional around certain times and want to leave good, lasting impressions with people, but are really struggling with being consumed by their depression.
And Dr. Sobo, with the case of the police department, tell us the resources that are available to officers. And as I understand, there weren't many in the past. There are more now.
Correct. In 2016, there were only 3 licensed clinicians for 18,000 employees and family members. We now have 17 clinicians, all experts in dealing with first responders. We are budgeted for 24, and we are opening up 2 more offices, which will give 3 different sites for our members to be able to go to so that they have easy access to care.
And we mentioned some of the factors that the FOP talks about. They've complained about canceled days off, mandatory overtime. There was an IG report that found that 1,200 officers worked 11 straight days at some point this year. Is heavy workload a factor here?
Well, of course, lack of sleep and physical exhaustion can make somebody more vulnerable to depression, anxiety, and not as capable of coping with the consequences of the job for sure. And, you know, that is why in law enforcement in general across the nation, there is such a high incidence of drug and alcohol usage, overdosing, depression, anxiety, symptoms of trauma, and unfortunately suicide.
And Alicia Warren, do you still see a stigma of folks, especially men, or especially men in positions like law enforcement, that acts as a barrier to them seeking out help?
I mean, stigma can certainly be a barrier. I don't know that it's as much of a barrier as it used to be. I think really expanding access to mental health and removing barriers, making it easy for people to get in to services is really important. And that's something that we've done. I mean, our mental health resources, our budget has increased 7-fold since 2019 under Mayor Lightfoot's leadership. And I think because of that, we've been able to expand mental health resources into almost every Chicago community area. And that has been a huge success. We're on track to serve 60,000 people this year in the city of Chicago. So I think just removing some of those barriers, but stigma, I think we're seeing is less and less of a barrier.
So that barrier is coming down. Do you see a stigma among officers?
You know, there's stigma involved in going for mental health services in general. However, we have succeeded in breaking down barriers, as Alicia was saying. In fact, the Chicago Police Department, EAP, serves more sworn officers and family members than any other mental health facility connected to law enforcement in the nation. All right. That's important to know because our membership needs to be able to trust and have confidence in the services that are provided for them.
Obviously, very important topic, very important issue, I know, on the minds of police officers and their families right now. We thank you both for joining us at Chicago Tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
And up next, keeping sober for the holidays. That's a conversation hosted by Univision's Alex Hernandez, first seen on Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. But first, we take a look at the weather.
The holidays can be a stressful time for a lot of folks. But for people in recovery for addiction and who are trying to maintain sobriety, the added stressors of the holidays can put them at risk of relapse. The 2018 National Survey on Drug Use and Health finds that just over 7% of Hispanic Americans have a substance use disorder. That's similar to the rate for the total population. However, studies also show that Hispanic adults who do drink tend to drink more heavily than other ethnicities. Joining us now with more are Omar Corro, Senior Director of Operations at Rincon Family Centers, Craig Dara, therapist at Metropolitan Family Services, and Evelyn Delgado, manager of the Medication Assisted Treatment Program at Esperanza Health Centers. I want to welcome all of you, but I want to start with you, Evelyn. Thank you for being here. What are you hearing from patients who are being in recovery during the holidays?
Hi, Alex. Thank you for having us. So the holidays can definitely be something that's very stressful for the clients that we serve, especially those in the Hispanic or Latinx community. A lot of things come up, feelings, grief. A lot of our clients don't have family support. So having these holidays come up that are traditionally kind of centered around family can be very difficult for them.
Evelyn, what are some triggers, for example, for people who are in recovery or trying to maintain sobriety might have?
Yeah, so even if they do have family that are supportive of them, oftentimes our festivities include alcohol, and that can be a trigger for somebody that's battling alcohol use disorder. Being around that can be very triggering for people, and a lot of times our clients are not able to kind of communicate their needs to their family because it's so widely accepted and expected at these kinds of festivities, and it's not seen as something that can be dangerous.
Definitely. Craig, what do you think might be, or what might being in recovery look like for different people?
Well, it's going to vary depending on why they're in recovery, I would think. And like Evelyn said, the holidays are tough for anybody in recovery, and they're tough for people who aren't in recovery. Imagine being in recovery. You have the holiday parties where people are celebrating and drinking. The stressful family dynamics might be a little stretched. Think about being in recovery and a person asks you, hey, what have you been up to lately? That you haven't seen in a while. That's a tough question to answer. Busy schedules during the holidays make it difficult. Sometimes people might let their guards down. People have a problem with drugs, meaning that they're not exercising as much. They're not going to meetings. They're not calling their sponsors. So whatever it may be, there's clearly stats will show there's I think almost a 70% increase in alcohol sales the last 2 weeks of December. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the stress and anxiety builds up and it hurts.
Omar, what impact do you think, cultural and family traditions in the Latino community might have in someone's journey to recovery?
Alex, thank you once again for having us. I agree with what Craig and Evelyn said. I do feel like the lack of education from family members is a big issue. And the reason I say issue is because if someone does not understand what an individual in recovery is going through, it's real easy to put pressure on an individual, especially during this time of holiday. Imagine, for example, going to a party and then everybody in the party is kind of pushing you to have that one drink with me. It'll be this one time, just have a drink. It's a celebration. To someone in recovery, that's very, very detrimental, and it's a huge trigger. I like to say that, someone in recovery, their specific substance, it's like eating a bag of chips. You just can't open a bag of chips and have one. You have to have multiple. And people need to understand that. And what we need to do is accept education, offer education, and make sure that the family is aware of what's going on and participate in someone's recovery. I know it's easier said than done, but I'm sure that we could all work towards that.
Right, and I think it's a great way to put in it, Omar. Evelyn, let's talk about the stigmas there are definitely, and what about the stigmas on addiction and getting treatment? How might that affect someone in recovery within the Latino community?
Yeah, stigma is one of the biggest issues, I think, just in general when it comes to substance use population, especially with things like alcohol use disorder, just because that's kind of what's going to be expected during the holidays. The thought that substance use is a moral issue, it's a lack of willpower, is so pertinent within the community that it's like, well, you could just stop if you really had enough willpower. It's not understood that it is a disease, something just like diabetes, something that can be treated, that needs either medication, therapy, exercise. It has multiple levels that need to be addressed. And if one does not stop or abstain from alcohol or other substances, it's looked at as kind of a moral failing on their part. And along with that, it's also seen as, along with mental health, it's not something that's discussed, it's not something that's talked about. And when somebody is struggling with these substances or struggling with these issues, oftentimes they don't seek treatment because they're afraid or concerned about what the family might say or their loved ones.
Speaking about the family, Craig, how might we help family members unlearn those stigmas?
Well, I think it's going to take a family effort. Like Evelyn said, getting treatment, getting help is needed, and like Omar said, education's huge. You can't do it alone. It's going to make it a lot more difficult if you try to do it alone. And I think you have to seek support if you need it, whether it be going to meetings, calling your sponsor, like I said earlier. Seek out treatment. Don't do it alone. Don't be embarrassed. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. If you look back at the stigma years ago, it was almost an embarrassing thing, mental health. Now let's get this fixed. Let's do it right. Let's get some support if you need it. Individually, you have to stay mindful of how you're feeling, know what your barriers are. And I don't mean like mathematically, I know that I shouldn't drink 6 beers, I'll only drink 3. I don't mean like that. I mean like know that if you go into a party where there might be triggers or people you used to use with or drink with, maybe leave a little earlier before they get there. So set some boundaries with yourself, seek out support, seek out treatment, and just don't do it alone.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you, Omar Corro, Craig Dara, and Evelyn Delgado. Thank you very much. Back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
Chicagoan Pat McGann was a retail packaging salesman from the South Side who ventured into the world of stand-up comedy at the tender age of 31. Since then, McGann's career has taken him from comedy clubs to theaters to an iTunes special, and in April, he'll be making his headlining debut at the Chicago Theater. Earlier this month, I spoke with McGann about his life and career. We start with this brief clip from his recent appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
I'm happy to be here. Just good to be out, right? Just good to be out. Got kids at home. My wife and I have 3 under 4. Yeah, that's how people react. Some people ask me what it's like. Here's a fast fact. 75% of the asses I wipe aren't mine.
Good thing to know. Joining us is comedian Pat McGann. Pat, good to see you again.
Good to see you. I love the intro. That's how I'm brought on stage all the time.
Right, this is how we're setting you up. You mine so much of your comedy from your life as a father of 3. So I'm wondering, when you're changing diapers, you're feeding your kids, you're putting them to bed, is your mind constantly thinking, this is a good bit? Or how do I make a bit out of this?
Anything that bothers me usually becomes a bit. Anything that's annoying or, it's usually things that you really love or really hate that you end up writing about. So it's anything in your life, really.
What are the situations with your kids, with your family, that sort of provide the most material for you?
Right now I'm talking a lot about sports and how it's been ruined by all these dads that didn't make it. It's like, why don't you guys calm down?
So they live vicariously through their kids.
Yeah. Your descendants aren't going to make it either. Can we calm down a little bit with the 80-game schedule, going out of state?
All right, well, what's the worst offense you've seen from some of these dads?
They just argue with each other. There's always like, how old's this kid? It's always a suspicious-looking kid. Everyone's like, who's Drago here? What's the age? Where's the paperwork on this kid?
So they take it totally seriously when it's their kids that are supposed to be just having fun.
Yeah, and the kids.
So you're the fun dad then?
I'm not the fun dad, but I'm.
So you're like that too?
Now I'm not super intense, but I'm not like I have I think a little bit of perspective. I like to observe it. And then, I see my kid when I tell him the game's canceled and he's flossing, just like, dancing, like, no game tonight, like, all happy about it. Then you see the absurdity of it.
What's your process from being in these situations to having a finely crafted set of this material?
Well, I think it's just repetition of living it and then trying it on stage, and then that's when you get the feedback from the audience and shape it, right? I was this weekend trying a new bit about shopping for old people because I'm trying to come up with some Christmas presents for my parents. And what do you get old people, you know? And so you know it's over when you start getting food for a gift. Because that's what we used to do. Like my grandma's like last few Christmases, it was like she's getting lobster bisque.
Or tins of pastries or sweets or something like that.
Her present's in the fridge, and you got to go get it and drag it in the living room. And then, I mean, that's the, you know, you just kind of live it and report it.
And speaking of living it, we mentioned at the top you were working in retail packaging sales until 31, until you decided to take a stab at this career. How daunting was it to enter this at the age of 31?
It was, you know, I never thought it was going to become a career, to be honest with you, but it was always something I wanted to do. I like to write. I was always filling out notebooks and coming up with ideas, and never was a stage guy, though, you know. I was playing sports as a kid. I wasn't on in theater or on a stage in front of people, so that was the daunting part. What I did was I went to some open mics here in Chicago. You know, there's a very vibrant comedy scene in Chicago. It's known for improv in Second City, but the stand-up scene is one of the strongest in the country. And on any night, you can go out to an open mic and get the vibe, check it out, and just being there makes it more real, makes it seem a little bit more approachable, you know?
I would imagine you just absorb a whole ton when you're out there a lot. You know, recently, you're probably absorbing a lot from Sebastian Maniscalco, the local Arlington Heights native that's now a giant comedy celebrity. He produced a stand-up special of yours on iTunes. You've been touring with him. What's it been like to work with him?
It's been insane. You know, I saw the B-roll here at Zany's behind us. That's where I met Sebastian, and that's kind of where my career kind of took off. I was a house MC there, was working there a ton, and being in his orbit kind of took me out of that club atmosphere where I was doing crowd work and working on like my persona, really. You don't really realize you're doing it. But when I went with him, I started to build material because you can't really do crowd work in his venues. He's doing the Chicago theater in every town. He's doing these big theaters, arenas now. It's been an insane experience. It's been unbelievable. He's really taught me a lot, really, and just by example too. Like he's willing to talk and listen and give me advice, but just watching him has really helped a lot.
And speaking of insane places you played, we showed that clip on Colbert. You did Letterman. Can you just tell me what it feels like the second before your name is called and you go out there in front of the studio audience, in front of millions watching on TV?
Well, the first time I did Letterman I was like an out-of-body experience. I was super nervous, jitters, kind of, and the guy backstage to relax me was like, hey, this is where the Beatles made their debut when they came to America.
No pressure
Have a good time. I mean, we're at the Ed Sullivan Theater, and at that time, that was the biggest thing I'd ever done, and Letterman was like a pipe dream for me, but that was a goal, you know, to be on his show. And so, you know, definitely nervous. And then when you get out there, you get the first laugh, it relaxes you, and then it becomes obvious that it's just stand-up. And really, like, you could talk yourself into it when you're off stage and out of that moment. Like, what are you nervous about? Like, people just want to laugh. Like, they don't want you to bomb. They don't want you to struggle.
They're all on your side.
Yeah, they're on your side, and they're nervous for you a little bit. So it's just kind of like get them to relax. But the TV audiences, you know, when David Letterman's introducing you, or you had the clip from Colbert, like that's greases the wheels too. Like you already kind of have their, you know, stamp of approval. Check this guy out, listen to him for a few minutes. So it's a really good situation.
And you still live in Chicago. You live on the South Side. You're going to make your debut at the Chicago Theater as a headliner in April. What does it mean to you to be playing this iconic theater in your hometown?
Oh, I mean, it still doesn't seem very real to me. I couldn't be more excited. I've been there before, opened for Sebastian at the theater. I did an event with the White Sox at the Chicago Theater.
I was at that show when you opened for Sebastian, by the way.
Really?
You were terrific. Yes.
Oh, thank you, Paris. I appreciate it, buddy. Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I've walked by that theater my whole life. It's like one of the most beautiful marquees in the country. And I've seen other comics there, been there as a consumer. So to be out there and get to perform, I'm fired up.
Do you have the material crafted that you're going to do that night?
No.
You have no idea what you're going to do?
Not really. I mean, I do have an idea. Like, I have some chunks that I've been working on the last year that are new, but I have some newer ideas as well, and things going on in my life that I need to talk about that will be in a few months, a little bit different. So it'll be good, though.
Interesting. We can't wait to see it. We once had Richard Lewis on the show who said that he has no idea what he's going to talk about when he goes out, and he's completely nervous. I assume that you have kind of a game plan of what you want to do.
I introduced Richard Lewis at Zanies one night.
Did you really?
And he parks in front of the club on Wells, and you're told to go up and introduce him when the car is out front. And he walks into the club and right onto the stage. And you can't say anything other than, ladies and gentlemen, Richard Lewis.
So as soon as you hear, the car like turn off or something like that, you have
He's
to start
there.
with the intro.
And then you bring him right up.
All right. Well, Pat McGann, great seeing you again. All the best.
Thank you,
Congratulations on that show, and we're looking forward to it.
Appreciate it.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Thanks to everyone reaching out on social media to tell me what packing peanuts are. I should have known. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.